Good morning, members of parliament, support staff, visitors in the Tribune, and those following this meeting by various forms of media. Welcome to the continuation of this meeting of the Committee for Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization number 3 of today, Thursday, September 14th, 2023. We've established a quorum of 8 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Yes, indeed. Just like when the year turns, we have to get used to now saying 2022-2023 was the last parliamentary year, and we are now in the 2023-2024 parliamentary year. I received notice of absence from the following committee member. These are MPs Peterson and Marlin. Are there any notifications at this time? I see MP Emmanuel requests notification. You have the floor.
Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to my honorable colleagues and the people of Sint Maarten, by whichever means that they are listening and watching today's proceeding. Mr. Chairman, I hope you can bear with me. I beg your indulgence a bit in this notification. It's going to be a bit lengthy because I've taken notice of an article in the newspaper that really caught my attention, and I think it's an extremely sad day in our country when we see these things happen. And I am in particular very upset with a number of groups on the island. But I'm going to leave that later on because I hope that they get their hands on the newspaper and read this piece and see and say something about it. Mr. Chairman, it says, suspended sentence for sexually assaulting girl. And it goes on. For sexually assaulting a girl under 13 years old, the Court of First Instance on Wednesday sentenced CMB Senior 75 to a suspended 15-month prison sentence on 3 years probation. It goes on to say, Mr. Chairman, the girl is a direct relative of B's wife, and the sexual assault had taken place multiple times over a period of 2 years. The girl between 10 and 12 years old at the time, which means, Mr. Chairman, he would have been 72 or 73. The Daily Herald refrains from publishing the full name of the convicted man to protect the victim's identity. To protect the victim's identity, Mr. Chairman. It goes on to say, B and his wife regularly babysat the victim and her siblings. Their home only had 1 bedroom, and when the children came over, B would sleep on the same bed with them while his wife slept on the floor. In this case, it was not unusual for the victim and B to be alone together in the bedroom. This was the case on the first night that he sexually assaulted her. The victim told the police that she had been on her tablet that night when B put his arm around her. He asked if she loved him, and she said he would always be there to protect. Gotta go to page 9. Always be there to protect her. Because he kissed her, he said that she would always be his baby girl. He then took her shirt off and touched her breasts with his hands and mouth. He also took her hands and put it down in his pants. She told police she also said he put one of his hands on her genitalia and tried to insert a finger into her vagina. At this moment, he stopped because he heard someone walking in the corridor near the room. Then he told her not to tell anyone about what happened because he would be sent to prison, and that he could not survive in prison, point blank, because he was old and sick. Sick indeed, Mr. Chairman. What would your father think if he knew what you did? Was also one of his threats, she said, and told police. She asked permission to use the restroom as an excuse to leave the room and did not return to get her tablet until her parents had arrived to carry her home. From then on, B would try to kiss her when they were alone. She told police, and she always tried to be around her siblings when they were in B's house or B's home. It got so bad that she did not even want to visit. I'm not saying she's lying, but some of those things did not happen, B told the judge on Wednesday. He admitted to fondling her breast and kissing her in various places, but denied that he touched the victim's vagina. He told the judge that he tried to touch her genitalia, but that her legs were closed. He said, oh my God, he said he did not remember putting his hand down his pants, her hand down his pants. This is the part that I am troubled with, Mr. Chairman. The prosecutor considered the charge proven, but said coming up with a fitting punishment was difficult in this case. Usually, this kind of crime is punishable by sentencing offenders to prison for 12 months. However, this is not an appropriate sentence for B, said the prosecutor. For one, the defendant is a dialysis patient and must go treatment 3 times a week. However, the prosecutor referenced a report from the probation officer which said B is capable of performing light tasks. If he is sentenced, the community service. With this in mind, the prosecutor demanded a suspended sentence of 12 months in prison on 2 years probation. He also requested that the court impose a 6 months house arrest sentence with electronic surveillance, 24 hours of community service, and regular meetings with a probation officer. I'm coming to the end, Mr. Chairman. The victim's parents brought their children to you and your wife, thinking they were safe. As a relative, you should know sex does not belong in the world of a 10-year-old child, the judge said. It goes on further, Mr. Chairman. In her verdict, the judge found B guilty of sexual assault, but had the same difficulty as the prosecutor in determining an appropriate sentence. She told B that he would have been sent to prison if he were a younger man. But this is not a suitable punishment given his age, because he's a dialysis patient and often resting at home. She also ruled that house arrest with electronic surveillance and community service was unsuitable, so he gets off scot-free. Without other feasible options, the judge imposed a suspended sentence, a prison sentence of 15 months on 3 years probation. She said she had gone higher than the prosecutor's demand to emphasize the seriousness of the crime. A suspended sentence means that B will not have to go to prison unless he commits another crime during the probationary period. If he does commit another crime, he will be forced to sit 15 months in detention. Mr. Chairman, when I was in prison for the days they came and locked me up, there was a gentleman in the same cell with me with 1 foot and on dialysis. And they used to come for him, carry him, and bring him back. And you know what he was inside the prison for? Sexually assaulting a little girl with 1 foot and in prison. But the prosecutor's office find this one. I rest my case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence on the notification.
Indeed, MP Emmanuel, thank you for that notification. It was a lengthy one, but considering the topic and what needed to be brought forward, I did allow it. Thank you for that. Are there any other notifications at this time? MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the more general remarks that I wanted to make at this point of the start of a new parliamentary year, I'll leave for the first public meeting of the year, which is tomorrow. But nevertheless, given the notification by my colleague MP Emmanuel, which, by the way, I just want to remind everyone was being read from the local newspaper. So it's not as if the MP is just here giving a narrative. It's what was read is in the paper, because I too cringed as I heard it, but it is something in the paper. That's the point that I want to make with respect to that. However, Mr. Chairman, the reason for me asking for notification is the fact that I believe that during the installation of the judge a couple of days ago, several remarks were made regarding different things that regard our justice system. One of them being, as everyone understands, the issue of the criminal procedure code. Mr. Chairman, I think it would behoove Parliament as a body to give a very clear picture where that entire matter stands. It should not be assumed for the lack of knowing that this matter has just been lying at Parliament since 2019. So I think for the general public, given the statements that were made, that overview be given, that the focus of the draft criminal procedure code has changed over the years, where depending on the emphasis placed by the different ministries, it has been on the issue of compliance with the CFATF guidelines. And other than that, sometimes the emphasis has also been placed on protecting victims. And where that is concerned, Mr. Chairman, again, I want to reiterate, I think from the Parliament as a body, an explanation should be given as to where that is at. However, in that same session, other matters regarding our judicial system were also brought to the fore. Matters such as the language in the courtroom. And again, it behooves Parliament to pay attention to this particular matter as well. It's not the first time. We have seen where one of our sworn translators, Dr. Linda Richardson, has written regarding that matter, which she encounters during her daily work in the courthouse, so in the courtroom. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to conclude this particular part by saying, with respect to the Criminal Procedure Code, let us give as a Parliament a clear overview of where things stand and some of the focus and emphasis that has been placed on the different matters in that code. And if we, and this is going to be a general request to the Committee of Justice, if we look further at the matters that were raised in that session that I referred to earlier. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my other general remarks regarding this parliamentary year would be made in our first public meeting tomorrow, God's willing. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. I will comment on the other notifications towards the end. Let me go to the next speaker, which would be MP George Pantiflet for notification.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the chair, my colleagues in Parliament, of the committee, of course, those who are viewing. Mr. Chairman, it would have been remiss of me not to also remark on that which my both colleagues, MP Emmanuel and also MP Westcott Williams, and I'm sure sentiments of others, as to the verdict that was given based on, I would consider this a crime that was committed. One of the things I've always complained about, and I'm sure my colleagues can agree with me, is the issue of the way the Dutch apply the laws when it comes to certain crimes. And, you know, we have to get more serious and aggressive when it comes to these matters. Because 15 months suspension, but what kind of psychological effect has this had on this child? You see, and it goes on for years into adulthood. I hope they will be willing to pay for treatment as she goes and gets some kind of psychological evaluation, because she will need that. So yes, I'm sure and I agree with our colleague, we have to look closer at the Criminal Procedure Code and ensure that these kind of acts are punishable not by suspension, but they have to be executed where the person, no matter the age, Mr. Chairman, if you do the crime, you have to do the time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Pantaflet. Are there any other notifications? No. Members of Parliament, let me first, regarding the first notification, this terrible situation, to see, indeed, and to confirm, it is in the newspaper here today, for those to confirm that the notification from MP Emmanuel was indeed something that he was reading verbatim from the newspaper. So it was a factual representation of what was outlined in the paper. There's a few things that definitely come to mind. Of course, the sort of selective justice that we have within our country comes to the forefront every time you see this type of situation. Another thing that jumps out at me, and it kind of reminds me of a conversation that I had with former MP Leonard, who also was trying to, had an initiative law that she didn't get to complete, but that was geared towards two things: raising, actually within the penal code, this punishment to actually 15 years is what she had proposed, and also a sex offenders registry, that we don't have, even despite the punishment that these people, and as it's done in most countries, parents, schools, everybody should be alerted to who these predators are. But especially coming back down to the punishment, where kind of like to add insult to injury, they also refer to the electronic monitoring, which we in Parliament indeed support the implementation of electronic monitoring, but you're going to prioritize giving this privilege to someone who commits such a crime? Not the many people who have been awaiting, going to the prosecutor's office saying, hey, you know what, I want to sit my time, give me electronic monitoring. They're being denied. But this person, no, please, let's put them on electronic monitoring. The selective justice that we have is definitely a concern, and that does tie to the aspect of the Criminal Procedure Code. Indeed, we took note of the speech of the President of Parliament, which has been sent, the President of Joint Court, and that speech was sent to the members of Parliament, so you'll be able, or it was sent to Parliament, it will be booked in, so we'll be able to peruse that speech in its entirety in written form. I did take note, as Chair of the Justice Committee, of the comments regarding kind of painting a picture that the Parliament has done absolutely nothing with regards to the Criminal Procedure Code, and as members of Parliament will know, that is extremely far from the truth. We have done a lot of work related to the Criminal Procedure Code for the edification of the public as well, that has been sent on to the government, and if I'm not mistaken, it was also asked to have the court review or give their opinion on this as well. So a couple of things that I do think we should do in response to MP Westcott Williams' notification. From the Justice Committee perspective, an update should be requested from the Minister of Justice, also to outline whether the Joint Court has received this document, which is something that should have been done, but also in discussion with the Chairman of Parliament, if a factual timeline and explanation can be given to the work that has been done by the Justice Committee and the Parliament of Sint Maarten related to the Criminal Procedure Code. So that will be at least communicated to the Chairman in that latter regard, and in the earlier regard, as Chair of the Justice Committee, I will consult with the Secretary General in terms of the follow-up with the Minister of Justice in that regard. I see no further need for notifications. Thank you, members of Parliament. The agenda point for this continuation of this committee meeting is agenda point 2, which is the follow-up discussion regarding reparatory justice and debt cancellation post-IPKO. This meeting was held and adjourned on April 4, 2023, after discussing and closing of agenda points 1 and 3. Today we continue with agenda point 2, hence today's meeting. However, before continuing at agenda point 2, it is important to note that during the previous meetings of the committee, 2 petite committees were established, one For the roadmap to referendum on independence, these would consist of the members Solange Duncan, Grisha Martin, Melissa Gums, and Angelique Rumou. And the second was regarding a framework for what this plan for decolonization should look like and include. This was comprised of MPs Grisha Martin, Rayon Peterson, and George Pantaflet. Considering that those agenda points have been closed, however, I guess especially for the edification of the public, I would ask if we can just get a brief update from someone from the first Petite Committee regarding a referendum on independence, and then also regarding decolonization from one of those members. I understood that MP Gums will be giving us that brief update. MP Gums.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you, Rifir, my colleagues, and those joining us online. Yes, in the Petit Comité, we held several discussions and exchanged several documents regarding to what we would then in the future present to the committee. Most notably, the history of referendums on Sint Maarten, what decolonization is referred to in terms of the UN framework for it, as well as a roadmap and plan of action that also included a public relations and communication campaign to make sure that in the event that a consultative referendum is held, the public is very well aware of each option. Each option is communicated and explained to them in an understandable manner, and that we engage key stakeholders in the community, leaders, influencers, etc., to help broadcast that message then of what the referendum would be about, whether it is about our constitutional status or it is about any other policy issue. As we all know, a consultative referendum can also be held for. So that is where we are at, and we will await the future committee meeting where we can make a full presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, and indeed that will be the idea. Another CCAD committee meeting would be called with that specific agenda point in mind, where you'll have the opportunity to present. And from the other Petit Comité, MP Grisha Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A pleasant good morning to you, a pleasant good morning to my fellow colleagues and those listening and viewing online. This Petit Comité has been actually busy with the, gathering a lot of information. It has been as getting the information and really fine-tuning the laws that we have, that is like the pain point for us. So going through them with a fine-tooth comb has been a little longer than expected, so we would need some more time to at least iron that out. And then, of course, when it's time to come back, and we create a full roadmap on how we decide how we want to incorporate it for just in time for the Kingdom Conference, because that's what we're looking on that. That's the end game, to at least have this information that we can bring it to Parliament, we can have a discussion on it, and at least we can then send it over to the government so that they can use that as information for the Kingdom Conference for next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that update to both of the, let's call them speakers for the Petit Comités. We go over to agenda point 2, follow-up discussion regarding reparatory justice and debt cancellation, post-IPKO. As many members are aware, during the last IPKO, reparations and debt cancellation in the context of reparatory justice was discussed. The IPKO decided that the next IPKO, the IPKO would go deeper into the subject of slavery, while the Kingdom Relations Committee typically deals with preparations for IPKO, as this committee has been engaged on the subject several times before. My suggestion has been that the committee prepare positions regarding reparatory justice. This discussion was opened in the last meeting, and this is being one of the pending Constitutional Affairs Committee meeting. I wanted to reconvene this meeting as it was adjourned in the last discussion. One of the suggestions was, at the time, was that the factions would perhaps prepare position papers. But in addition to that, we would do interactions with other bodies. For example, we have the museum here today. We still had the suggestion regarding doing a sort of a Zoom meeting with the CARICOM Committee for Reparations, which we haven't been able to materialize as yet, but that is something that we would want to do. Yes. Yes, so that would be this is for the entire committee, indeed. So the idea behind this agenda point was to begin that discussion both within this forum, but also internally within the different factions. Since that time, there has been a lot of other matters coming to the forefront. First of all, I don't know if any factions have sent any position papers as yet, or if they will be doing so. So serves just as a reminder that the committee did discuss that in the last meeting. And at this time, of course, it is not to say that this would be a ongoing or this is an open and closed discussion. This agenda point was adjourned to allow us to reconvene, but I do think at some point, in order to close this meeting, what we should probably do is, if some members do want to speak on the topic somewhat, but we should delve deeper into another, once hearing from other third parties, once maybe discussing various positions amongst ourselves, then going deeper into the subject, particularly before, as was mentioned, let's say the Kingdom Conference, but also the IPKO, the next IPKO as well, as I would imagine that the topic, as was agreed in previous IPKOs, would continue to be a part of future IPKOs. So at this time, I see MP Westcott Williams would like the floor, followed by MP George Pantaflet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, once again. And Mr. Chairman, on this topic, I would like to put forward some issues that would be helpful for us to get understanding on or about in continuation of this topic towards the next IPKO or any other meeting regarding such. Not too long ago, Mr. Chairman, it was publicized that CARICOM will be seeking $33 trillion in reparations. Apparently, a study has been done to determine where that number came from. That's one. It is also mentioned that it is a starting position. But what is interesting is that based on this report, in terms of reparation amounting to $33 trillion, that negotiations are going to start with the British government, I think maybe the French as well, and a third one. Strange enough, nothing is mentioned about the Kingdom of the Netherlands in terms of negotiations where this matter is concerned. The baseline, or the bottom line maybe rather, of these discussions that are to take part is the 10-point CARICOM reparations, the CARICOM reparation 10-point document. And so it would be interesting to know, one, what are we doing as Sint Maarten with respect to this document of CARICOM? We have heard statements, we have heard lectures here on Sint Maarten, but are we on this boat, is my question. And if not, why not? Is there a separate trajectory where the Dutch Caribbean islands and countries are concerned? Is my question, because I see no mention whatsoever of our status. While, on the other hand, it is being claimed, or it is being sold to the people of Sint Maarten that we're part of this process, and we have a keen eye out for what is happening in the region and in the islands around us. But where is that manifested? So where is Sint Maarten's part manifested in this process? Since we are, as it has been told to us by the government of Sint Maarten, we are definitely on track, so to speak. We are definitely on this boat or train, depending on how fast it is moving. That's one thing. So I would like reference to be made to this and that question to be asked. There is a resolution, maybe even a ministerial decree regarding the Sint Maarten's National Slavery Committee. And in that committee, persons are mentioned who are part of this committee, as well as sectors that are represented. But those two do not connect. So my question is, with respect to our national committee, who represents, who of the members represents the different sectors as mentioned in the same resolution. I think it's the ASCAD, something to that effect. But that committee, one, and since the last time when we were told that the committee was preparing its work plan, it would be good for us to know what has happened. Also in connection with what I mentioned regarding the CARICOM's initiative for this reparatory justice, if you wish, reparatory program to start to move. So, Mr. Chairman, those two issues I think should also be taken along in whatever proposals and or questions that are going to be posed as we continue to prepare for the next IPKO on this topic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. One of the things that I could take from what you've said there regarding the ASCAR, would it be maybe an idea for the committee to meet with this body? That maybe would be a proposal for us to consider. So if that is the case, we'll take a note of that and then see if we can schedule the opportunity, because those type of questions might be valuable to get that information in terms of their representation, their work, and so on. So thank you, MP Westcott Williams. Next, we have MP George Pantaflet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the matter of debt cancellation is really proven to be something that has to be pursued vehemently. Mr. Chairman, I looked today at today's newspaper. St. Maarten duped if Curacao does not sign in-year loan offer. We all know the story of the 600 million euros that is supposed to be shared between Curacao and St. Maarten. And because we are part of the kingdom and it's formed by 4 countries, the Netherlands, Aruba, Curacao, St. Maarten. St. Maarten is being told, look, if Curacao don't sign, you're in trouble. So, Chairman, I will continue to state that the issue of the cancellation of the debt is where it should all start, Mr. Chairman. A motion was accepted, was approved here, supported by 14 members, 13 members beside myself, in order to have the debt canceled unanimously. And I agreed with my colleague, MP Westcott Williams, I say it plain, opposition or not, we need to know what is going on with the committee that has been established to look into that. Because the fact is, right now, because of this threat by the Dutch government, and I said it during the closing of Parliament, they're the ones who should pay the 600 million euros to ensure that the pensioners get their money. I do not agree, Mr. Chairman, with the fact of St. Maarten having to carry that loan. But unfortunately, as things stand right now, if nothing is done, then by the end of January 2024, if I'm correct, those senior citizens, 27,000 on Curacao and 3,000 on St. Maarten, would only be collecting 20% of their pension, Mr. Chairman. That's a heavy responsibility. That's a heavy responsibility, Mr. Chairman. And what I find is unfortunate is that we continue to allow them to bully us, interfering in our internal matters, and we're not allowed to seek assistance or to dialogue with anyone else to help ourselves. It has to be through them, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, I think that we as a parliament, because the last IPKO meeting was not there, I heard something was mentioned about the debt cancellation. We even heard the Prime Minister state that the State Secretary is saying, and also supported by her Dutch colleagues, that they don't even want to discuss that. So it is time that we start to turn up the heat, Mr. Chairman, and make sure that we are heard, because, as was said, There's nowhere mentioned where what we are doing, what St. Maarten is doing, where that's concerned. And I'm sure the Prime Minister said it plain, that in the discussions, they're being told no. So I think it's time when us as Parliament get more involved also to ensure, because right now, as things stand, we are not heading in the right direction financial-wise. I'm not concerned about whether we're able to carry anything at all. We should not be carrying anything. You apologized. The King apologized. The Prime Minister apologized. But you want to have it business as usual. No, Mr. Chairman. But it takes courage sometimes to take decisions. It takes courage to take decisions, Mr. Chairman. So definitely, I'll await the response that was I requested, I believe, concerning more information as to what is transpiring. As we note, the British curriculum has already started their process, and yes, it can take some time. Mr. Chairman, I close with this, and I'll continue to state it, no matter some persons might get upset or whatever. The issue of us having to pay this illegal debt, not only the 600 million, but the 1.2 billion, the liquidity loans, all those things, Mr. Chairman, should be cancelled. Because if you can put aside 2.5 billion euros for Ukraine, and you can't write off 600 million or more or less, if you look at our total debt, maybe 800 million killers. Sorry, my apologies, not our debt. But what you owe to us, based on slavery, and Mr. Chairman, I'll repeat it. The fact of the matter is, and we're going to hear some of the Slavery Museum, go ahead with the museum. I want my money. Because putting 200 million for us to work on the museum and so on, that's fine. But that does not do anything for us financial-wise, Mr. Chairman. So let us don't allow ourselves to be blinded and think, oh, that's a great gesture. No, it's not. It is trying to retard, prolong their responsibility, Mr. Chairman. And it is your problem if you cancel the debt that you have to deal with the continent of Africa and in whatever other countries you colonize. You should have stayed home in your caves where you came from instead of coming mess up our people. Because we are the ones that ensured that there was civilization, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope that the people of St. Maarten are listening, because they say, yes, but George, you're the same thing all the time. Yes, as long as I don't see any results, I will continue, Mr. Chairman, because I know for a fact that if we get rid of that debt, many things that you want to see take place in St. Maarten, it will be possible. If I remember the Prime Minister correctly, if the figures are correct, I can be corrected, the payments will go from 12 or 14 million to 24 million annually. And then you can pay in terms after 15 years, after 30 years. No, Mr. Chairman. The debt has to be cancelled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Pantaflet. Next, we have MP Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you. Good morning to my colleagues and everyone tuned in. Mr. Chairman, I want to remind everyone that not only the landscape changing, but the language that we hear, maybe even that we use, is changing as well. Maybe a year, 2 years ago, the word reparation, we wouldn't have heard it in the Dutch, I don't want to say lexicon, but we wouldn't have heard it from the Dutch in their vocabulary. But now we're hearing it. So almost a year since the first apology was made, the only word we were hearing, I believe, was repair. And for us, it's like, what does repair actually mean? What are you talking about? But now we're hearing the word reparation. And I can say, and proud of the fact that at least in Maarten, here in this little parliament, we have mentioned a number of things. This committee itself was us foreseeing that we were in a new era and that this would be permanent discussions, not something that just came about or, based on some events that happened and that changed the world, but that permanently now we would forever be changed and we would be speaking in a new way, so to say. So the language is already changing, that we've gone from repair to reparation. Now, the reparation discussion is a complex one. I believe that we need to create a Dutch Caribbean reparation agenda. We do have the 10-point agenda, yes, and that is also our foundation. However, in the Dutch Caribbean, we have different identities. We have various different ways in which we look at our European colonizers, and we are in a very unique position already if we compare ourselves to our brothers and sisters. So a Dutch Caribbean reparations agenda needs to be created, and I think we as a parliament play a role in that. Why? Because not only do we represent the people as a collective, but we've already shown that we're setting trends. MP Pantoflet's debt cancellation motion for one. Nobody else in the islands were talking debt cancellation, really. No other parliaments made moves as it concerns debt cancellation. So we were ahead with decolonization, we're ahead with debt cancellation. It's all connected to the reparations discussion. So for me, we do, and I would agree that we do have to get those papers done because I think it's important for us to also have a voice. The government has their committee. The government has put a committee in place, ASCAR, and ASCAR will give an advice. I also do look forward to hearing that advice as well. But as Parliament, we play a role, and we have been, again, in my opinion, ahead of the curve as it concerns these topics. We also have had, we had last year a roundtable. We have all agreed on the fact that there needs to be constitutional changes, especially at kingdom level. You know, if we are going to move forward in a more equal kingdom, as long as we are in this kingdom, maybe someday we won't be, but for as long as we are in this kingdom, we have agreed that there needs to be changes constitutionally there as well. So there is a lot happening, Mr. Chairman. It is an extremely complex landscape, but I think we've already made strides, and we just have to continue to give our opinions and do our part as well, because it shouldn't be left up to no one community organization or up to government as government. Parliament has a role to play at local level, and then at the regional level and kingdom level, we also have roles to play. So I look forward to us continuing our work. I think those papers are necessary because there are different discussions happening. But I think, like I said, again, we have done what we needed to do over the last couple of years, and I look forward to our continued work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Duncan. Next, we have MP Grisha Helga-Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, while I agree with everything that is said thus far by all three of my fellow MPs, I want to just also take the opportunity to highlight what's to come. What is the future going to be after November, or let's say even the first quarter of next year? The new composition of government that's going to be forming in Holland. What would that mean for us in the discussions of the Kingdom Conference the first quarter of next year? If we come and propose all these democratic deficits, how will they in return take it in? How would they address it? Those are the things we have to be cognizant of. Those are the things that we have to pay attention to. What type of government will we have in Sint Maarten? What type of government will Holland have? And how will the talks take place during that Kingdom Conference regarding the same democratic deficits, regarding the same reparations, and what kind of conclusions will we draw then? It has to do with the dynamics of who's in next quarter. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP Helga-Martin. Next, MP Westcott-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in connection with several of the speakers before me and MP Heiliger's comments, I know that we have had this whole discussion about the Kingdom Conference and whether or what role for the Parliament, whether we should even suggest anything, whether we should be there. If we are, as what should we be there? But, Mr. Chairman, it would behoove this committee and the CCAD committee to continue to press for the Kingdom Conference. Yes, we've heard it has been postponed until the first quarter of 2024, but I don't think this Parliament that has been saying so much about what we would like to see addressed in a Kingdom Conference that we could just leave it up to the government and the preparations. Because if we look at the years following the last Kingdom Conference, which, yes, is on an executive level, nobody is disputing that fact, we would see where if the pressure is not on having a Kingdom Conference, and I think that pressure should also come from our parliament, it is not going to happen, all good intentions notwithstanding. So I don't think we should be fazed by the, yeah, but let the government do what they got to do. No, there is too much at stake for the Kingdom Conference, and we got to continue to press on it and to press for it. Just for the sake of the public, it is in this Kingdom Conference that supposedly and hopefully we will be talking about the changes in the charter that have been, the necessity therefore has been expressed by all of the parliaments of the kingdom. Motions by Dutch members of parliament or the parliament of the Netherlands, all of these things, expressions by this parliament, expressions by other parliaments. So I am not in favor of taking a hands-off approach where this Kingdom Conference is concerned. And again, I say, notwithstanding whatever criticism that we might face about allowing the governments to do what they have to do. And to substantiate what I'm saying, I just recommend that persons look at what has transpired or not transpired since the last Kingdom Conference, and it had to do with, when we going to organize it, who going to organize it, what are the points that are going to be discussed, and those kind of things. You had different political views on it, and that's why we are in 2023 talking about the next Kingdom Conference after a hiatus of approximately 10 years. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to give the committee that. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott and MP George Pantafla. Just keep in mind we do have an 11, so probably after this I'll have to close the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to Mr. Chairman, agree with former Speaker. It should not be left up to government alone, but Parliament has their role to play. And something that always baffles me, but unfortunately, it's a legal procedure where, when it comes to the Kingdom Conference, they're talking about the governments and so on. And it's as if the Parliament has to take a side seat or sit on the side and see what takes place within government, and only what is discussed at the IPKO, you hope that government accepts it. And that's a problem I have personally, because Parliament, we are the representative of the people. The ministers, the government are appointed, but still we find ourselves based on the charter, based on laws and so on, that when it comes to these matters, it is the government that has to discuss and then come to Parliament, and then Parliament would say yes or no, depending on what it is. And that's something that I personally have an issue with. But, Mr. Chairman, as I said, I agree with the former Speaker that we as Parliament should play a bigger role when it comes to the issues of reparation and debt cancellation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, MP George. Next, MP Westcott.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, and if we're going to get embroiled in this discussion about the role of Parliament in the Kingdom Conference, maybe we want to consider to change the terminology to a roundtable conference on constitutional matters.
Okay. Just to comment on that, the latter point regarding the Kingdom Conference, what I would suggest is that in the next Kingdom Relations Committee, that these positions are put together on paper, and the Kingdom Relations Committee, I think, would be the body to send the position from a Kingdom Relations perspective. Well, first of all, we want the Kingdom Conference or need it to happen. This is what we think should happen, and ask whatever necessary questions. So, MP Helga Martin?
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, send the, when you finish. send the proposal to the CCAD committee?
Well, I was proposing we discuss that matter of the Kingdom Conference in CCARE committee,
Okay,
have
and
a
then we-
position
okay.
and say, this is what we want the government to
I think it's
answer
a good
on
idea.
and so. And then the CCARE committee sends it as a body to, on behalf of the parliament or, you know, whatever.
I agree with that,
Yeah?
Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Okay. MP Westcott Williams?
Yeah, just to understand, Mr. Chairman, so the report of this meeting will go to the CCARE as well because several issues have come up here. So we might as well pass them on to the CCARE. So just wanted to
What-
make sure that
Yeah, so
Yes.
the points that were brought up here indeed would be forwarded onto the CCARE committee so that that can form part of the discussion. And the end for that particular agenda would be that something is sent to the government with a clear position on what we would like to see. Thank you, thank you, members of parliament, for that. I know we're running up a bit on time, but a topic like this, I definitely have one thing that I would like to share with the committee, and that is many references are often made to one of the most well-known prime ministers within our region, Mia Mottley, and rightfully so. She has had, especially in recent years, quite a lot of success on both the local and international stage. But I wonder if people actually know what was her initial first action that truly embarked her to be the person she is today. And I want to read a little bit of a synopsis of that for us to understand what was Mia Mottley's initial claim to fame on both the Barbadian and the Caribbean and the global stage. Late on May 31, this is from a New York Times article. Late May 31, 2018, 5 days after she was sworn in as Prime Minister, 5 days, Mia Mottley and her top advisors gathered at the windowless anteroom of the administrative office in Bridgetown for a call that could determine the fate of her nation. Mottley got straight to the point. Barbados was out of money. It was so broke that it was taking out loans just to pay interest on the old ones, even as infrastructure was coming undone. Soon, the nation would have no choice but to declare itself insolvent, instigating a battle with dozens of banks and creditors that held $8 billion in debt, triggering austerity measures that could spiral the island into further poverty. But there was another way, Mottley said, and she needed the IMF's help. Mottley, the first woman to lead Barbados, had been working on this conversation for nearly 2 years, consulting with experts. And soon after that, the island was ripped by a hurricane that obliterated Dominica as well. The IMF is both the assessor and enforcer of global economic policy, the de facto gatekeeper for the world capital markets. Mottley knew that banks and investors would work with her only if Barbados were participating in a formal IMF program for economic reform. Mottley told Lagarde, the director of IMF, that Barbados was prepared to do voluntarily what most countries would have been coerced to do, but in their manner and by their wishes, a budget adjustment and tax adjustments. But she needed something in return. With the effects of climate change bearing down on the region, the kind of austerity that IMF demands for these developing countries, slashing the size of governments and agencies, and firing thousands of public employees while auctioning off real estate for other national assets, would no longer work. The next day, Mottley declared that Barbados would stop making its payment to the nation's debt. She said, quote, "Today, my friends, we pry off the hands that have been strangling us," she said. And the rest, ladies and gentlemen, is history. She took a decision on behalf of the country, and she did consult with, let's say, the IMF. But she took the decision that the spiraling debt, and very interestingly, she ties climate change. Why? What affects Sint Maarten and plunges us into the most debt? Climate change. Does Sint Maarten cause climate change? No, they do. Because of their carbon emissions. And that is the connection that we also need to make. We did not cause COVID-19. We did not cause Hurricane Irma and Lewis, etc. We are victims of this. And then we're given loans to help us with those situations, which then puts us into further debt. At a certain point, Sint Maarten really needs to take a tough decision. And I do agree. I think the parliament needs to spearhead that. At the end of the day, we are the budgetary body. All of these loans are on the books of the national budget of Sint Maarten. And my position would be is that Sint Maarten is going to have to take some seriously tough decisions when it comes to taking a position that we cannot no longer sustain this yoke of debt on our necks. And that I wanted to bring to that content, because sometimes people think, oh, it's just the Sint Maarten politicians coming up with this. The same politician that so many in Sint Maarten and the rest of the Caribbean like to laud, she did that 5 days after swearing in as Prime Minister. And that needs to be our claim to fame as Sint Maarten as well. I want to thank everybody for their participation in this Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization Committee meeting. We have a few follow-up points which will be handled, and with that, I hereby close this meeting as we prepare for the next Constitutional Affairs and Decolonization Committee meeting. This meeting is hereby closed.